Hello from Detroit. I'm Brad.
I'm Can.
And we are excited to talk with you today a little bit about a particularly strong marketing campaign that recently came out by a brand called Richer Poorer, which is not an underwear company, but a undergarment company. No, that's not even it.
An innerwear company.
An innerwear company. So that's right, not an underwear company, but an innerwear company. And they ran a fantastic new campaign that we're going to talk a little bit about today. In fact, maybe that would be a good place to start. What was this campaign all about, and who is Richer Poorer besides an innerwear company?
Sounds good. Well, so they just ran this fantastic influencer marketing campaign, or a little bit of a twist on your traditional influencer marketing campaign that they called the Just More campaign. So basically what they did, Iva Pauling and Tim Morse, the co-founders of Richer Poorer, took 5 other business owners, creative young entrepreneurs, hustlers to Honolulu, Hawaii. And there was a huge focus in this trip on kind of just building community amongst the 5 of them, creating relationships between all of them, and talking about, how do we run our business? What is it that we believe in? Of really cultivating this very positive, can-do kind of attitude and spirit on this trip, and also just really focusing on building actual relationships with these people that are going to continue long after the trip is over. It was 6 days in Hawaii. And so at first glance, it sounds kind of crazy. It
does sound crazy.
Yeah.
It sounds like a vacation. Like, hey, why don't you call up 5 of your other entrepreneur friends and go to Hawaii for 6 days? Like, that sounds fun. I don't know if it sounds like a marketing campaign.
Yeah, and the reason they were able to make it work, they brought people like Bobby Kim, who's the co-founder of the streetwear company The Hundreds, Jenny Britton Bauer, who founded Jenny's Blended Ice Cream, which is amazing, based in Columbus. And so none of these people were actually paid to post about the trip. There was no contract. There was no you have to post 5 times on Instagram or whatever. But all of them do have really fantastic and engaged followings on Instagram and other social media.
So Richer Poorer just said, hey, come to Hawaii with our CEO, our 2 co-founders, and spend 6 days with us. That was it.
Yeah, that was it. All costs are covered, no contract. And obviously the Richer Poorer staff internally was kind of skeptical about this. They were like, not so sure. We've done influencer marketing before. We've paid influencers to come in and shoot our socks and underwear and stuff like that. Kind of felt inauthentic. And the reason this worked is because basically they're all going for the same types of people, but also it really speaks to the young millennial who cares a lot about the creative economy and
Sure.
Having a fulfilling job and all that sort of thing, that it's speaking directly to.
Yeah, the thing that kind of strikes a nerve with me is that I can totally put myself in the shoes of the marketing group at Richer Poorer, who spent a ton of time trying to drive acquisition and create their brand. And like you said, they'd actually worked with an influencer before, paid them to come into their studio, get a chance to try on the innerwear, get really accustomed to it, and then push it out to their audience. And it was effective, but they just didn't think it was authentic enough. So I'm thinking if I was on that team, I would have a really hard time transitioning from the more traditional marketing to doing something that's completely outside of the box. But the crazy thing, it was really, really effective. And not just from a branding perspective, but it generated millions of new customers to their site that they could attribute directly. And like you said, it was because they ultimately had started to forge these relationships with people who have a very, very strong knack for storytelling and were authentically excited about telling the story of Richer Poorer, which is funny because that's always what we're talking about with influencer marketing is you want to make sure the influencers really know your product, are really excited about it, because if it's a half-assed endorsement, it's not going to be effective. And here, these are very influential people and CEOs that aren't traditional influencers based on their Instagram account, but are based on their reputation in the industry and their knowledge and their ability to storytell. So like, that's a really, really powerful thing. And I think, to me, like, jumping into why it was effective a little bit here, that's exactly what they were able to do. They were able to take the same concepts of influencer marketing and apply it into a totally different environment, which happened to be Honolulu, one more hang loose, and with these thought leaders that are CEOs. So I can only imagine what those conversations were like when the two co-founders were trying to tell the rest of their team that this is where they were going.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine you coming to me and saying, hey, I think we have a really good idea for Outloud's marketing. I'm going to Hawaii.
Yeah, maybe not Hawaii, maybe Aruba. What do you think about Aruba? We don't want to do the same thing.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll talk about that later.
Okay, all right, sounds good. Sounds good. Okay, so what about in terms of ways that this could, like, do we hit on all the strengths, or should we dive into some of the areas where that people should be a little bit cautious about this?
Yeah, for sure. I think the main sort of drawback or downside or potential caution is that this isn't necessarily scalable, in the sense that it probably won't work for your more traditional larger brand. It works for kind of the young, hip, and cool, like, hustler type of creative brand, but not necessarily your bigger picture.
So if you have a really well-established legal department that's going to be really particular about what your CEO does and where budget goes towards, it's probably not going to work out too well. Like the auto industry, for instance, given that we're in Detroit.
Yes, and I think right along those lines, even with smaller brands, there's definitely potential to alienate your potential customer base with something like this, like kind of like we were talking about, like, oh, you're going on vacation, like, good for you, whoop-de-doo, like, what does this mean to me?
Right.
It really hinges on the developing a real authentic community aspect to be successful, and also believing that all of these people are truly becoming friends and truly kind of promoting the same end goals of, like, living your best life sort of thing. Yeah. Do you have anything else that you think is kind of a drawback?
So on the not scalable piece, totally agree with that. I think there's two reasons for that. One is it involves a ton of time from the CEO. So the CEO had to be involved in this marketing initiative for 6 days, and that's really, really complicated. The second thing is, when you're doing something like co-branding or using these huge thought leaders in companies that are adjacent, you're going to run out of companies that are adjacent pretty quickly. So when you're an innerwear company and now you're working with an apron company, that's great, but you're probably not going to be able to partner with another clothing company besides the streetwear and the apron company. It's going to be tough to continue to partner with additional clothing companies. So it's not particularly scalable, but the concept of partnering with other companies is absolutely fantastic, because we talk all the time here on Thinking Out Loud about there's two ways you can try to get an audience. One is build up your own organically, which is strong and positive, and we definitely recommend it. It's also free as a general rule. But you're gonna have certain limitations that are intrinsic to a business making recommendations on their own behalf that don't exist when you have a separate set of influencers or people who are going to advocate for you. So usually we're talking about influencers in a more traditional sense. They have a very large social media following. In this case, some of them did have social media followings that were significant, but it was really about them being leaders of complementary companies. But in both cases, that's fantastic. They were willing to move outside of their own sphere of influence and try to tap into the sphere of influence of others, which to me is the core takeaway of why this campaign was successful. And I also loved how they did some additional things to try to continue to bolster the campaign after it was done, also through giveaways on their site, which continued to drive more sales. So yes, this was a point-in-time campaign, but credit to Richer Poor, they found a way to continue to extend that. So yeah. So we've talked about the campaign, we've talked about its strengths, we've talked about some of its drawbacks. I think that's a pretty good episode.
I think we covered it.
Well, great. Thanks again for tuning in. I'm Brad.
I'm Can.
Goodbye from Detroit.
Bye from Detroit.